inspiring biblical families. Turning Hearts Podcast with your hosts, Ryan Phillips and Dennis Aldy.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Turning Hearts Podcast. Ryan Phillips, Dennis Aldy, here to answer some questions and get to the point of everything that's going on these days. Today, let's talk about, let's get back to family stuff a little bit. I'm sure we'll get into how it bleeds into today's world with the virus and the lockdowns and the conflict everywhere. But bringing it back to men in leadership and the home and the children, I want to talk a little bit about how we make our house, our home, the most enjoyable place to be for our children.
Yeah.
Because when they get older, and I'm sure some people that have listened to this have older children and maybe have had this happen, but they constructed a home with biblical values, with rules and guidelines that they've established. And when their children got to an age of freedom, being that they could leave and all day and go somewhere else, and they just ended up sleeping at the parents' house and doing everything outside the home with a job or whatever. Sometimes they jump ship and they go and leave those principles and those guidelines and leave them behind. And so, how do we keep that from happening? How do we win the hearts of our kids too? And I spent many hours with your sons. And I can say for a fact that they carry almost stronger, and I don't know if that's all the way true, but they preach stronger almost your message when they're not with you than they do in the home. And what an awesome thing. Yeah. So how do we get to that point? My sons are very young, but I want them when they're older to be preaching my values. And so how do I win their hearts and my daughters as well? How do they look for a family, instead of saying, I want to cast off all this stuff and just do my own thing. And putting all the scriptures in place. And I've just seen it so many times in Christian families that it seems like the parents did everything right.
Yeah.
They did everything good but they lost the heart of their children somehow. And the fact that when their children grew up, they rebelled or they just did not take that message with them.
Yeah. Well, it's a good question. To be honest, I'm going to ask that question the way it was asked to me by another person about 3 years ago. And you've actually given the answer, but I'll try to develop that answer a little bit. So someone asked me, actually it's probably maybe 4 or 5 years ago, someone that has known me for quite a while, maybe 15 or more years. And so my oldest child is, I may not ought to tell that, 30 years old. My youngest is 17. So 15 years ago, that would have been a 15-year-old and a 2-year-old. So that was in the thick of, when we had those young children. But then they asked me, though, the question about 5 years ago, because they lived with me when those kids were 2 to 15. Not lived with us, but in our community. And they said, so I need to ask you a question. I was like, sure, shoot. I was hoping they were going to ask me, like, I don't know, deer hunt, something about deer hunting or whatever. But anyway, they didn't make it easy. They said, we watched your family and your kids grow up over about a 15-year period of time. And there were other families within the community that we had as a small church. And we watched their families that had similar age kids. And we watched y'all do the exact same things with your children. Why is it that today, now that those kids are 30 to 17 and other families have kids in that range as well, why is it your kids seem to love you and want to be with you, and their kids all hate their parents and have left the family and the family values? And I was like, well, I don't know if I want to answer that question because it could sound incriminating of other families. And I don't even know if I knew the answer. So my first answer is always Jesus, literally. He does work. His ways work. But I have to qualify that with the answer. And I did give an answer to the question. The answer to the question is capturing the hearts of your children. Okay. Two people can train children the exact same way and have two exact opposite results. And the only difference I can see is one's pure motivation and vision for training is to capture the heart of a child and develop the relationship. And the other one is to get this outcome, this appearance in public. Because as parents, we get so tempted to not get embarrassed when we're in public by our kids, and that becomes a driving motivator rather than the heart in the relationship. So that's the answer. But how do we do that? How do we do that? I have a lot of thoughts. One is that, okay, so relationship is the issue. How does that practically work into the raising of our kids? And in my opinion, it starts when they're 2. And maybe your child is 12 and you realize, oh no, I may not have done this. I'm about to enter that time. Or maybe, and you're worried. So there is catch up, but it is possible. I just want to say that. It's about the relationship. So, the questions, when I say that, here's what a lot of people think. Oh, that's right. You just never discipline them. You give them everything they want, and then they'll love you forever. That's a pure lie. I just want everybody to know that is absolute lie. A child loves what he respects, who he respects. He respects someone that has the authority in his life to teach him. And that is always whoever he admires. So they are birthed coming into the earth admiring 2 people, mommy and daddy. And so mommy and daddy will take that admiration and use it in an authoritative way, not a friend way yet. Now, the ultimate goal when they're 30 is friendship. But at 3, it's not friendship. So we have to, but while I'm disciplining those children, I don't discipline for discipline's sake. I discipline for the heart and the relationship's sake. And that's why it's difficult. It is always easier to be a robot than it is to develop a heart. It is always easier. If you look at the church system as a whole, like what is church for you and your community, or everything in church, everything in the world, what is it? It's always programs, okay? We got to figure out how to make the kids happy. We got to figure out how to make the wives happy. We got to figure out how to make the husbands happy. We got to figure out how to do parenting. We got to figure out how to do marriage. And we immediately begin to make it a program so people can know how to do it. And it gives us this false reality. Well, surely if I do step 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, I'm guaranteed a response. And that's what happens in our parenting when we lose the heart of our children. We did the 5 steps, but we didn't capture their heart, and I say that is the development of the relationship. And then they rebel against it. And we become bitter, and then we go this far. Well, that's the wrong way to parent. And I discipline my children. I don't have their heart. Discipline is wrong. No, discipline's in the Bible. But there's also the unconditional love and the development of the relationships in the Bible. And I would say discipline, and this, I'm just making these numbers up, but I bet I wouldn't be far off. I would say discipline is about, I don't know, I'm going to make a guess, so I could be really wrong, 20 to 25% of parenting. Mm-hmm. And so it would take about 20 to 25% of my time to discipline. Relationship is about 199% of parenting. And that takes 199%. So that's twice as much time as I actually have. Okay. And I don't know how to change that. I think in one of our podcasts, Ryan, I said this to you already. If if I were allowed to speak to America or to the earth, to parents of kids ages 2 through 15, I would like about 10 hours to talk on one subject, and you would be shocked at the subject, but the subject would be, because I see this literally, it's probably the number one issue in parenting. It's not what we're doing. Well, it's not our steps, but the subjects are the distraction of parents, not the kids being distracted. It's the parents are distracted. And here's what I mean by that. We as parents are sitting and it's Tuesday night in the house, and we just had supper, and we're going to present a great picture. We all ate our meal together, and we all got up, and we all cleaned the supper, whatever. Where's the place you eat? The table in the kitchen. We cleaned it up, and we all went in the living room, not necessarily for family time, but for just kind of 30 to 40 minutes of just kind of chill out time before we go to bed or put kids to bed. And parents are distracted for those 30 minutes. They're not focused on, I have 30 minutes with my children to capture their hearts. They're focused on, well, I got to put the kids down in 30 minutes, so I'll be with them in 30 minutes. So I got 30 minutes to check my social media, 30 minutes to text and get my day tomorrow going, 30 minutes to go take just go chill out in the other room and not be in the room with my kid. And I hate to sound like I'm being so critical of parents. I'm not. But I watch this, and literally this podcast could go on for hours if I just decided to try to open the eyes of parents to what I see. Mm-hmm. And I see parents in church, if the kids are with the church, the kids are sitting there and they just want to obey mom and dad. But during the meeting, they're checking their phones. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, did you come to church? Well, just if you came to check your phone, do it at home. Don't come. And so that tells me that at home, when their child is sitting beside them, they're checking their phone. It tells, and then the other thing is parents. And I'm gonna cover this by saying I totally understand the mental exhaustion of parenting. I had 7 children. We had 7 children. I totally understand the desire, the legitimate need to check out and zone out and get entertained in front of some kind of entertainment, or entertain the kids with that same type of entertainment, but kid-friendly, so you don't have to deal with the kids. I totally understand it. And I got a solution for it. Schedule yourself one section of time a week that is the children are cared for, and you get to build yourself. You get to, relax, chill out, schedule it. But the problem is we don't schedule it, so we take it about 90% of our time, and we don't take the hearts of our children, and we don't even see it. And I'm telling you, I watch it all day long, every day, because Dara and I are around families with young children, and I watch it. So capture the heart of your children, and don't be distracted. The second one, the problem again is we're distracted. And you said this too, make your house the funnest place there is on earth. And here's what that means. Okay, so I remember my oldest son was 5 years old. So that means I had a 3 and a 1, and probably my wife was pregnant. And I 5 years old, and I just remembered growing up, I played baseball, summer league baseball. So I thought, I ought to sign up for summer league baseball or T-ball or something. And so I wasn't really thinking about it, but I went down and I signed up my 5-year-old for summer league baseball. And, a week or so later, we get an email, or it probably wasn't an email, I don't know. We got some communication that said, okay, your son's been put on a team and he's going to practice 2 days a week, and we're going to have 1 game a week. And literally it was like, bam. I was like, y'all are fixing to take 2-3 days of a week of my time. But I want to relax. I don't want to be going to the baseball park every day. No, and I mean, I legitimately was in shock. And about 30 minutes after that shock, I went, oh my Lord, I got the greatest parents on earth. When I was from 5-year-old to, whatever age, they drove me all over the country. They spent their whole life taking me to practices and games. I mean, they worked like, just constant. And then they gave all their free time to me and my brother. How did they do that? And I mean, I was just having this internal battle. And I was like, oh no, I've already got 3 children and 1 on the way. 1 takes 3 days a week. 2 would take 6. 3 would take 9. 4 would 12 days a week. And I'm exaggerating, but this really happened with me.
Yeah.
And so I just went, that's exactly right. I have children and I'm fixing to give them my entire life. Literally, I made a decision about the time my first son was 5, and I took him and signed him up for his first outside the home activity. I went, wow, I didn't think about this before I had kids. I'm not going to have any more time at all to myself. And you recognize that a little bit after you get married. You get married and some friend of yours, a great friend, it's not a bad friend, not a bad situation, calls you up and says, hey, can we go to do so-and-so today for 5 hours? And you're like, sure. Oh, wait a minute, I'm married. I can do it for 30 minutes, and we begin, but parents and Christians, it's totally unintentional. It's not because we're bad. It's not because we're evil. It's because we're not paying attention. And yet we expect our children to pay attention and give us their hearts. Mm-hmm. And so what I mean by making your house the funnest house, so when I went through that little T-ball revelation experience, I made a commitment that the rest of my life was going to be, all my time was going to be given to my children. Now, I ended up getting to go deer hunting, and that was kind of my time. But you know what? I took my kids. I ended up, going to the stores I need to go. But you know what? I took my children. And then I also want to say I definitely had free time. But my focus became my children so much that, and then I began to realize, you know what? I don't want my kids going to somebody else's house and having fun. I, Dennis Aldy, am going to be the funnest guy on the earth. So I just began to live out my fun dreams with my kids. Hey, let's go camping. And I spent money there and I spent time there. Hey, let's ride 4-wheelers. Hey, I don't know. Hey, let's climb trees. Hey, let's go hunting. Hey, let's and so I say it in this kind of sarcastic way. I decided, and my wife decided, to get up off the couch and give our lives to our kids. Mm. And so if I could see that my kids were interested in basketball, guess what? I became a basketball coach. I coached 4 teams a year. If I could see that my kids were in baseball, guess what? I became a baseball coach, and I coached 4 to 5 teams a year. And so you recognize that meant every night of the week, I gave my time not to catching up on the news, not to even learning more about engineering in my career, not to building my dreams. My dream became my children and their hearts. And I say that, I hope it's making sense.
Yeah.
And I know I even feel like I'm kind of being critical of parents. That's not my heart to be, but I'd love to wake you up and say, just check where your time and your thought and your energy of your mind goes. And all of a sudden, if you realize that there's a free day on Saturday, don't be thinking, I'm going to take a break Saturday. Now, if that's the plan, take a break. I'm not against breaks. But decide, let's invite all our kids' friends over and let's just go out in the yard and play football. Go out in the yard and play baseball. Let's go for a hike. Let's go for a bike ride. Let's go for a walk. Let's go for having and building. And I'll tell you, in realities, when I say make your house the funnest house, here's the reality of what we're doing. It's build an identity of what your family name is. So I spent so much energy defining what it meant to be an Aldy. And it was that everything about us was about our family. And we did everything we wanted to do, but we all sacrificed for the good of the team doing it. And I used the language of team all the time, the time. And right now, I mean, like we coach families, Dara and I do. Families call us and they're like, oh, our family doesn't relate at all. Can you help us? And so in doing that, we begin to teach them. And that was a gift of God from my parents in my life. Was I was in a lot of team sports and I had great coaches I'm so thankful for. And they taught me what team meant. And so I thought, well, if when my kids are 17, if I don't want them to go join another team, I better build the best team there is here. And so from very early, I began to use, and you don't have to use the language team. You were telling me you read a book where a great godly man used the ship, terminology. Build the ship that nobody will want to jump that ship and go to another ship. Yeah. I think what a great reality. But I think those are two of the main keys, I would say. First, it's about the relationship. It's not about programs and steps. So if I'm in that moment of discipline and I recognize a sensitive moment with the heart of my child, I cast off everything to capture that heart. I change me to capture that heart. There'll still be discipline and consequences, but my step-by-step program is thrown out the window. Now, again, that could be taken wrong. Like, I don't believe in discipline, and it's all about the flying by the seat of our pants in the moment. It's not that at all. But in every moment, the vision isn't the outcome that it looks good in public of great kids that obey mom and dad. The vision is that I capture the hearts of my children. And then develop a team. And when I say I use team language, Ryan, things I did was like, we're the Aldy team. And you know what that means? And they're like, what does that mean? And I said, we give everything for the team. And so you know what that meant? Dennis Aldy. I didn't just require my kids to give everything for the Aldy team. Dennis Aldy gave everything for the Aldy team. Yeah. So I said no to friends, things I wanted to do, just to be with the Aldy team. And that way, when I said no to my children to be with another team, they were like, oh, Dad does this all the time, so we do it too. And then it gets as practical as, okay, they're invited over to a friend's house and maybe you don't feel comfortable with them going, So you're having to say no. As parents, unfortunately, we get to say no quite a bit. So if you're getting to say no's, let me encourage you, make a bunch of yeses. Not necessarily in the exact moment. It's like, no, you can't go over to Jimmy's house, but yes, you can. But say no. I encourage you, if there's a flag in your heart about what they're asking to do, say no. Be the leader. But in the same time there, also think, okay, what could we do that would be more fun here? What could we do that would be more, and it involve our whole family together, and our kids got to go to other kids, I'm not saying, again, there's no extremism in everything that I'm saying, but we did. So we always had the camp outs at our house. And you know what? I didn't send them outside to camp out. I went outside to camp out. I lost sleep. I got bug bites. I had to deal with the roaches in Mississippi, and then I didn't send them over there to go play baseball. I went and played baseball. Do you get the picture? And I involved even so. And the thing about us, I wouldn't let our family split up. So So with 7 kids and 5 of them on a sports team, I didn't let one of them do soccer, one of them do baseball, one football, one basketball, and one ballet. Now, we did do 2 when we did ballet. The girls did ballet and the boys did sports. But I'll say this, guess who took them to ballet? Me.
Dad.
Yeah, Dad. Because and Dad made brothers go just to stand guard, watching over their sisters. So ballet for our daughters became a family Aldy event.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And so I didn't split my family up, and the husband's got 3 kids he's dropping off at soccer, football, and baseball, and mom's got 2 kids she's dropping off at ballet and piano. No, the Aldy family did baseball. And for game night, everybody went to the baseball park, even if we were tired. And again, we were there as a family because the Aldy team does things together. And so I'm building that into a 2-year-old's mind, a 4-year-old, a 6-year-old, an 8-year-old. So now they've grown up that everything they do is family and family first. And that played into, if 2 kids were fighting over a toy and they got mad at each other over a toy, we didn't always decide who got the toy. We said the toy's leaving our house because it just made a brother not love a brother. And there's nothing more valuable than a brother loving a brother and preferring a brother. So, and I'm just throwing out little bitty practical things we did.
What would be some, was there points at in the younger years when you're doing all this that you could see reward, like you could see them? What are some telltale signs of their hearts being won?
Oh, well, I'll be honest. This one will sound like crazy, but you begin to see that they actually love it when you discipline them because they trust you. They've given you your heart. That sounds like crazy. Like, what do you mean? No child, nobody would love. And no, they didn't love the discipline, but the discipline caused them to feel so safe and secure and loved by daddy that it actually caused them to give him or mom more of their heart.
Yeah.
Okay. We actually saw that. Then we see, and again, it wasn't just give dad their heart, but give the family, give the Aldy name their heart, and what God called us to. And so we're always using the language of God put us together. He knew it was best for us, even with our weaknesses, even with our difficulties. And so, going over to a friend's house and the friend asking them to go do something and them coming back or them telling the friend, I appreciate that. And we taught them how to say these things, but then watching them say it on their own later was some of that sign of their heart. Aldi's don't do that. And this is an 8-year-old. Well, I appreciate that, but Aldi's just don't do that. Yeah. And I'm not there. They come home and a brother says, yeah, he was asking, he said, and so we high five those moments. Again, we're a team. So we'd all get together and we'd put our hand and go 1, 2, 3, Aldy on 3, 1, 2, 3, Aldy. I mean, we did it all the time. We were a team. By the grace of God, not by my greatness. I want that very clear. The Lord kept leading us to build the Aldy team. Mm-hmm. And the greatest thing, and so as a sports person, as a coach, I've coached for lots and lots and lots of teams, and being on those teams, the one thing I'll always remember is a document that I read and had coaches say to me, team, T-E-A-M, together everyone achieves more. T-E-A-M, together everyone achieves more. And I bit into that as a young athlete at 6 years old on the baseball team. And to this day, I still teach and preach in the church and my family. Together, we'll do more. So what that means for daddy is some of daddy's desires go bye-bye because I want to be a part of a team and achieve more. Some of mom's desires go out the window so that we achieve more. each child some of their desires. And people hear that, and it's like, oh no, God wants me to fulfill all my desires. He gave them to me. And I'm like, well, let me tell you your greatest desire. You may not know it, but your greatest desire is to be on a great team. And it's the church team, the family of God team. But it boils down to your family team. And I promise you, you'll rather have that than great riches. I promise you, you'd rather have that than a successful ministry. I promise you, it will feel better to you on the inside to have 19-year-olds say to their 19 and 20-year-old friends, Dad, would you come play with us? Because it's always much more fun when you're with us. And not, I'm coming because I don't like, you know what I mean? It feels way better than a career, than a ministry, than all the things that we give that undivided attention to. It feels way better. So seeing those things, they do happen all along.
Yeah.
You will see your kids' hearts turn to you. I think I'll mention one last one, and then you may have a comment. That'd be awesome. We should do a podcast, Ryan, on transitioning our children from adolescence to young adults. A huge thing in the Aldy family history and life has been what we labeled as rites of passage. I think that's the wrong name for it. I have other names for it, seasons of passage and stuff like that, to indicate more what it is. But real quick, just not to make a long story, but my daughters. So you want to talk about weeping uncontrollably as a father and your greatest desire on earth happening. At each of my daughters' ceremony, where we did a walk through gates of character and then in from being an adolescent into a young woman, my daughters surprising me, and I didn't know it, had purchased a little silver heart, and they engraved on it the date of that ceremony and their name and their heart, like, so Joy's heart, and stopped the ceremony I didn't know it was going to happen. It was a total shocker, and had written out this wrong letter with the help of their mama saying, Daddy, today, before I step into womanhood, I give you my heart. You talk about just passing out as a daddy, and all the things they said about that and what that means and how that looks. I don't know that a man could experience more joy on the earth.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're after. And you know what? We're after that because God the Father's intention for his son is to capture the hearts of his children. He didn't want children that are just great at obeying rules.
Right.
And then our heart's not in it, and when we get old, we leave. He is after a personal relationship that takes years to develop. It takes a focus beyond all other focuses. And that's what he wants with us. And that's what I want more than anything, is the phenomenalist relationship, if that's a word, with my heavenly Father.
Yeah. So
now, as a father, I want that with my kids, and I'm just giving everything on the earth. I will give up. I mean, I say this in all humility and with all sincerity and soberness. I believe I would be willing to die in a moment for the sake of my relationship with my children. My wife as well. I'm not excluding her, but that's how serious those relationships are. So anyway, it's the
line that Joy used, I love it still. Thank you for taking the role as my father seriously. I mean, as a young adult, recognizing that is, and it's funny that you transitioned to that, because I was thinking the same thing. I think as fathers, we kind of have this. We don't think. At least I don't think goal-oriented very well. And so I have to challenge myself constantly, like, where am I going with this? And I think as a whole, as a body of Christ, as Americans, we I don't know if you've mentioned it yet in the podcast, but you've mentioned it several times to me about how teenager isn't in the Bible. So,
Yeah.
so that whole stage of life that we've given to
Yeah.
children, it's like a free ticket here. Go rebel for a while, and then hopefully you'll come back and talk to me later. And so, getting rid of that and that void of time, what as a goal, would it be smart to say, I need to pick an age that we're shooting for, that my children are now, I don't know if you say transitioning to an adulthood, but a responsible human being.
Yeah.
I mean, what in your we'll just call it the rites passage for now, but
Yeah.
Is there an age that you would say, okay, I'm shooting for this age that they're going to transition to, I don't know if you're calling it adulthood or
Yeah.
responsibility or.
Yeah, well, and let me just fill in a little bit of your blanks. So the whole thing about teenager, I was at a Christian conference one time, and I think at this time I probably had 3 kids, maybe only 2 kids. But me and Dara, we wanted a lot of kids, and I won't tell you the number, but it was double-digit number of kids. And so that was our vision. We're going to have a lot of kids, and the preacher made a comment. He's like, well, you just give all this stuff to your kids and you take care of them and you try to train them. And he said, but you know what? When they become a teenager, they're just going to rebel. And then you don't get to talk to them. There's just anger and hurt and wounds and bitterness. But you know what? When they turn 24, 25, they kind of start to settle down, and you just hope you get to be friends again then. And I'm sitting in this conference with, I think it's actually about 1,000 or so people. And I'm just like, I got to quit. I don't want to be a Christian anymore. If that's the goal of Christian family, I want another religion. If that's all Jesus can purchase for me, I can get that one without him. Do you know what I'm saying? Literally, yeah. Another one of those like, this can't be all that we get. Jesus really should be more powerful than this if he's the all-powerful, saving, righteous Savior, So I remember, and you know what, but I grew up, and that is the experience of 90% of the church. It's sad to say that's probably the experience. And then there's this, the whole saying that the worst ones are the kids whose daddies are involved in ministry. The preacher's kids, they're the worst of the worst. And they probably are, because they were neglected more for ministry's sake.
Yeah.
And they lost, the pastors didn't mean to, but you wake up one day and you've lost it. That's the issue. You think you're doing some things and you think, but you don't know, and you don't know, and you don't, and you get busy and you build a career and you build this and do those things. I'm not against them, but have the right priority of the family first. And then you wake up and you've lost them and it's too late. And that is the story. So then we go into, I hope they come back someday. I hope they come back. And we start, often we even compromise things we believe to get them to come back, and we become the enabler of them never coming back. But yeah, so that birthed in me, there has to be more in Jesus than what I've been living. And yes, I went through difficulties with my parents, but my parents were so phenomenal in that season and time, and loved me so well. To where, and then, you've heard, and I don't know, maybe not, we heard of this Jewish bar mitzvah. And I didn't study it a whole lot, but I'd heard it was like at the age of 13, and they kind of did this ceremony, and it was a big thing in their culture. And I don't know, I'm not speaking to what that is or not, but I just thought, I knew my own struggles when I became a young adult, and I began to think, well, when do children, is there an age? And this is just the simplicity of who I am. I thought, well, if their body physically goes from a child or an adolescent, goes through puberty, and it matures to a point of adult body, meaning they could reproduce, maybe that's when they become a young adult. So if the Lord is doing that physically, just naturally in their body, then maybe that's when I, as a parent, should mentally, emotionally, and spiritually be preparing them for that new transition in life. And so, yeah, it turns out, again, I'm not speaking from true knowledge, that the Jewish culture at 13 did these bar mitzvahs for their sons and such, but anywhere from, and our kids today, I have heard of some kids going through puberty at 10. I've even heard of some younger, and that, it was attributed to all the steroids in our food that we eat. And I think that makes perfectly good sense, that that's probably why it happens so much earlier today in our children. But in realities for ours, it was still around 12 to 14 years old. So that was that season that I was preparing for. And I didn't forsake the training and the discipline and all that in the young years. No, every day. I mean, I have a 17-year-old, and I'm still preparing for our relationship when she's 40. So for me, it never stops.
Yeah.
I want the best available relationship on the earth with my family until we're dead. Mm-hmm. And I want them to pass that on, and I want to pass that on to my grandchildren. So, yeah, that rite of passage time, we were preparing for it when we had 2-year-olds, mm-hmm. knowing that there would be this season that we would, and it'd take a while, but and I think we should do a whole podcast just trying to explain and encourage our families what that can be. But I can tell you this, even a rite of passage isn't the answer. Mm-hmm. And as many, so I've done 7, and then I've walked some young men, and I'm actually walking some others through it right now, just manhood and things of that nature, just as a men's group, both young. I mean, mm-hmm. I've watched other fathers do it with children, and they didn't capture the heart, and the rite of passage becomes a point of contention because parents feel like, well, I gave them that year, and I gave them so much in that year, and now they're rebelling. And I said, well, you know what? Good job. High five. Excellent job. You gave 1 out of 15 years. My advice, and I would never criticize, I would never judge, mm-hmm. but that's why I'm saying this today in a podcast. Parents, start today. Capture the hearts of your children. Use the words team. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you another one. Teach what loyalty means through the Bible. Loyalty is a lost character trait in humans today. Mm-hmm. Everything in the earth is telling us no loyalties except to self, which is the opposite of team. Right. Team, again, together, it means I'm more loyal to the vision of the team than to Dennis Aldy's own vision, which is Christ, which is everything Christianity in the Bible teaches. So anyway, I would say that I would have one more piece of advice. This one will sound a little weird, but this happens. In the Garden of Eden, what caused Eve to fail? And to my knowledge, I'm not quoting scriptures, but the enemy, the serpent, Satan, came and said, did the Lord really say not to eat or of all the trees or whatever? But what he did in asking the question, Eve allowed him to put a 1% doubt in her mind in trusting her God the Father. Yeah. And 1% of doubt in your authorities will lead to 10% doubt if it's not checked. And 10% doubt in your authority when you start to have 10% doubt in your parents, children, and so I'm telling this to parents so we will begin to ward this off. we will begin to renounce this, pray against this doubt. And it can come when they're 19. That's when the enemy's going to offer it to them, because their 19-year-old friends are going to be getting to do a lot of things. And then the church is going to call them out in a prophecy meeting and say, the Lord says you're called to do all these amazing things. Don't let anyone hinder you. Today is the day for you. And that child's going to go, wonder why my dad won't let me go on that mission trip. Didn't he hear that today was my day? Did your dad say today's not your day? And 1% doubt becomes 10%, and all of a sudden the circumstances begin to pile on, and all of a sudden we go, I don't know if they're for me anymore.
Yeah.
And they're jumping ship immediately after that. I believe it or not, in the last 10 days, I watched this happen with an extremely godly young man, extremely excellent young man of character, where a Christian community, no intention. Again, I remind everybody almost all the time. So here's the thing about the devil you need to know. He's out to kill, steal, and destroy. And we hear that, and we actually have nice thoughts. We need to understand that those are like really bad, harsh words. They're not friendly. They're very aggressive. They're cheating. They're lying. They're sneaky. They don't play by any rules. Those words, the devil doesn't, and we expect the devil to play by rules if we do. Mm-hmm. I won't take anybody from your kingdom, devil, as long as you won't take nobody from mine. All right, I won't touch your kids if you won't touch my kids. No, he don't play. He's like, oh, sure, I won't touch any of your kids except in the morning. He's out. He's after breaking the relationships in the family. Yeah. And so I teach. As a parent, I taught loyalty as a character quality, and then I chose loyalty. Again, I don't teach what I'm not willing to live. Mm-hmm. And so I made loyalty choices for my family all the time so that I could look at my sons and daughters and say, you make loyalty choices to the family. And then I watch in my own life where the enemy puts a percentage of doubt in my leaders. And then therefore I'm able to help let my children see how the enemy puts doubt in them as 21-year-olds, as 19-year-olds. And it's never intentional, but it's like, well, you got to be careful about your parents. They may be biased for you. And I'm like, you're doggone right I'm biased, because God wants me to be biased. He gave them to me, so I would be biased.
Yeah. And
here's the exact example. And then you may, again, if you have a thought, that's awesome. I love it. Here's what the enemy he puts a slight doubt, like some friend of the family will come up to a 20-year-old and say, I just see God all over you. You're awesome. You're amazing. God has so many plans for you. And they'll say, don't let nothing hinder you or hold you back. And then a year later, they didn't take that thought captive, as we've talked about. A year later, they're wanting to do something, so they ask their parents, and the parents are like, I don't think it's quite time. Let's keep training for that, or I don't know what it might be. Mm-hmm. But all of a sudden, they find another 20-year-old, and they say, well, what are your parents like, and what would you do? And those 20-year, we begin to decide that a 20-year-old who's never invested in us more than, let's say, 3 years, maybe they became our closest friend at the age of 17. We believe that they're more for us than a father and a mother that have probably spent $500,000 of their own life's money raising us, providing for us, paying bills for us, caring for us, loving us, praying over us, and knows every part about us. We assume this other 20-year-old is really more for me than someone that invested all of that. And you just think, if you look at it that way, like there's no way they could care more for me. There's no way. Even if it's a young lady I'm supposed to marry or a young man I'm supposed to marry, they can't care and have your best interest at heart like a vested parent. It's like this. Right. If you or me, Ryan, were to take $500,000 a day and put it in the stock market, I bet all of a sudden we're going to really care about the stock market.
Yeah.
And rightfully so. It's not evil of a parent to care. Be by it. Anyway.
Yeah.
Be careful about doubt. That's another reason children jump ships and leave teams, is the enemy planting doubt. So
it takes asserted effort after the heart of any relationship.
Yes.
To navigate that and to weed those out. I mean, they're weeds is what it is. And if it's gone unchecked, it just continues to grow and grow. And I mean, as our garden is so big now outside that I'm having to actually help my wife with this year. So there's just so much of that that's getting into my brain now. But it's like a weed that if it's unchecked will just destroy all kinds of things.
Destroys a lot of things.
And so it's true, and it takes everything. That's the good news, as you would say.
Yep. What a joy.
Just plan on it taking everything of your whole life and heart.
And even find other friends that are willing to give everything so y'all can encourage each other to do it. That's really big.
Yes, and we've talked about community before too, and how much it really does. You're a team, and if you can be a team within a bigger team, it will help everybody achieve more. So that's awesome. I mean, that's encouraging. And
I'll say 2 practical things I would leave people with. Literally, anybody listen to this podcast, I encourage you to start this week as soon as you hear this podcast, and to dad especially, but even mom, once a week, I want you to ask every child you have individually, not, hey, family, but go to each child one time a week at a minimum and say, how's your heart doing? And then don't say anything else, but listen. That's the most practical way to capture a heart, is find out how it's doing. And dads, I fail at this all the time. Don't fix it yet. You didn't ask to know how to fix it. You asked to hear how it's doing. So accomplish that. And then, I would ask this to a 2-year-old. And you know what? They're going to say, blue color. And you don't know what in the world it means. You can go, oh, I love blue too. I love blue too. That's awesome. But you're training them to share that heart with you at 2. So when they're 4, they share it, and with 6 and 8 and 10 and 12 and 14. And every time that answer is going to grow, all those things. And then every now and then you just say, yeah, after they're finished, my heart's been thinking about this. And then you just hug them, and that's it. You just communicate about your heart after you have listened about their heart. So super practical. Tell me what's going on in your heart. Tell me what your heart's thinking. Tell me how your heart's doing. Real easy. And that would be the first thing I would say. I just forgot the second one, so give me just a second. What was it? Practical. I don't remember.
Just so
do that one. Just do that one a whole lot.
The second one's to be continued.
That's right. Right.
Well, I hope it was encouraging to everybody, and bless you today.
Yeah.
And your families. If there's any questions or comments or anything, email info@turninghearts. And bless you and your family today.
Yeah. Amen. I agree. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to the Turning Hearts podcast.